Time by another live episode of Real Estate Titans. I am your host, Greg Fowler, traveling through the marketplace, interviewing the top real estate professionals in our field, from realtors, builders, lenders, developers, residential or commercial, really gathering insight, inspiration, what drives and motivates these top professionals to the level what I like to consider a real estate titan. Our very special guest and real estate titan for today, Frank Fanelli. Frank, thanks so much for being on the show.
Glad to be here,
man. Absolutely, this is an absolute pleasure. You're a legend, my friend. So this is really, really great stuff. So just like what we're typically going to do, going through interviewing these titans, going through the series of questions, gathering insight, and really what drives you, who Frank really is. So I guess without further ado, let's jump in. So Frank, tell everybody a little bit about you.
Well, it's interesting you called me a legend, which makes me think that I'm old.
No, come on, that's not
old
it
in
at
the
all.
business.
That's not it at all.
Old in the business.
Seasoned, distinguished.
Seasoned.
Yes.
35 years. Sometimes it blows me away to think that it was 35 years ago that I actually made the decision to get into real estate, and a little different than a lot of people who got into who are in the business now. I call myself a cradle realtor, and so I chose real estate as a career coming right out of college.
Awesome.
Which was very interesting. I started when I was 20 years old.
Okay.
And so needless to say, I've seen a lot of changes.
Right.
Not only in the real estate market, how things are done, but certainly in our local market here in Colorado Springs.
Okay.
So a lot of people that know me know that two of my passions when I was in high school and college, one was playing football and the other one was I was a drummer.
Oh, no way.
And my father was a very famous jazz musician here. He was with the Broadmoor Hotel. He was the director of entertainment at the Broadmoor Hotel for 40 years. Okay. And he had a jazz band. He did a lot of the big band jazz concerts and things here, and so I picked up a little bit of that. I was a drummer, and eventually that's how I ended up going to school. I went to school on a music scholarship to the University of Northern Colorado.
Okay.
When I was there, I realized that music for me was more of a hobby. And I didn't want to do it as a profession, so through all of my other studies, I realized that business was the way I wanted to go, and then I decided, where do I want to be from that standpoint?
Right.
And I took my first real estate class for my business degree, and it just really resonated with me. It was like the first time that I said, wow, I've taken a class that really interests me. And I was a very average student, but it's the one class that I just blew out of the water, and it was on top of my class and whatnot. And it was actually my professor, because I had transferred to UCCS here in Colorado Springs. Okay. And he said, Frank, why don't you keep your studies top of mind over summer? Why don't you take your real estate courses and get your license? And so I really wasn't prepared to do that at the time, but I said, well, what the heck? Right. I was already in the study mode. Went to Jones Real Estate Academy, which goes way back here in Colorado Springs.
Yeah, Jones.
Passed my test, and the rest is history. I started in the business, and I've just loved it ever since.
Oh, that's huge, Frank. And you can have a lot of understanding for your progression, being here for a long period of time and knowing the markets and seeing your pathway to where you're got involved and where you're at now. So tailing into that, just to let everybody kind of know a little bit more about you, what's your why, Frank? I mean, what really gets you out of bed in the morning, drives you to do what you do at the level that you do it at?
Well, that's a great question, and being a big fan of the Titan series that you've done, congrats to you on that.
Thank you.
I'm not one that watches a lot of video, but I've really loved getting to know some of my peers in the industry. Some I've known very well, like Randy Reynolds.
Yeah.
And some of the guys and gals that have been around a long time.
Sure.
Some of the newer Titans that you've interviewed have been really cool, because I've gotten to know some people.
Sure.
And gotten to hear their why and how they came into the business. But I've heard this mentioned before by some of the other Titans, and that is that your why changes
Yeah, that's big.
with time in the business and with age.
Sure.
So when I was first in the business, and of course I was coming right out of college, you know, my why was a little selfish.
Okay, hey.
It's like, man, I want to make some money. I saw the experienced realtors driving nice cars, nice houses, and that kind of thing, and
Sure.
that's kind of what drove me then.
Right.
And probably drove me for the first maybe 5 to 10 years of my career.
Okay.
When I met my beautiful wife, Melissa,
Awesome.
and we got married and had children, my why, that's when my why really started to change a lot.
Wow. Okay. Shout out to Melissa, by the way.
Yeah, hi babe. So what happened was, at the time, she was a closer for Security Title and then eventually Stewart Title.
Wow.
And so we met through the business, and the great thing is we were intertwined in the business, so there was no stress from having to work weekends and late hours and that kind of thing. She certainly understood that.
That's big.
So that why became more about my family, about being a good husband. It's like, how can I be in the business, still devote time to, you know, my faith, my wife, my children, and that kind of thing. And so working weekends and getting that extra deal became a little less important. Took a little bit of a backseat to making sure I was there to see my children walk, run, sports, that kind of thing. The thing that blows me away is with that first big change in my why, that's when I noticed that I started to become more successful, and I felt more successful, and I felt more balanced. And it was at that time when my wife Melissa and I were kind of going in two directions because we were both in the real estate related industries.
Right.
But we realized at that time that it was time that maybe we connect and get in the business together.
Interesting.
So that's where the Fanelli team started.
Okay.
And Melissa and I worked together for, I think, 13 to 15 years, somewhere around there.
Wow.
It was a very successful partnership, and I give her the lion's share of credit for my success.
Sure.
So that's where the why changed for me a lot.
Okay.
That was probably my first big change in my why. And then after my kids were a little bit older, my why then became, what can I do to be more than just a realtor that shows houses and lists houses and that kind of thing.
Sure.
And that's where I started to have a desire to own my own company.
Okay.
So that was, I could see where my why was changing again. And one of the things I'm very proud of in my career is that I was one of the founding partners of the Platinum Group Realtors.
Wow. Yeah.
And was able to be blessed enough to get together with some great partners who are still there,
Sure.
Running a very successful organization. And so that was my why.
That's
for
huge.
about 10 or 12 years.
Okay.
And then that why started to change again because I was already in the business, even though I was young and I felt young, and I was nearing 50, I was thinking, my gosh, I've been in the business for 30 years already, and I became a top producer in Colorado Springs, and I was a partner in a successful real estate firm, and I started to feel my why change again, and that's when Melissa and I had purchased a home in Scottsdale, Arizona.
Okay.
And about 10 years before. And we were loving going down there, spending weekends down there. I've always been a warm weather guy.
Sure.
Everybody who knows me has always dubbed me the lizard.
The lizard.
Because even though I'm a Colorado boy and I loved skiing and things like that, I always opted for the warm weather.
Wow. Yeah.
And
I don't blame you, Frank. I get that.
So that's when my why changed to saying, you know, what am I going to spend my last 10, 15, 20 years of my life, my working life doing?
Sure.
And I was ready for a new challenge. And it was very difficult to leave something that you had such a big hand in creating. But we did it. We decided, hey, how can we still service Colorado Springs, our clients here, and yet maybe do the same thing down in another location?
Wow.
And we took a leap of faith, and I have a very good friend from college that owned a very large RE/MAX firm. A good buddy of mine, Del Rounds, with RE/MAX Fine Properties. That's where my license hangs in Scottsdale, Arizona.
Okay, fantastic.
And he was, I was sending him a lot of referral business, and he was one of the guys who said, Frank, I love that you're sending me all this business, but man, you're letting a lot of clients go unserviced. And he was one of the ones that convinced me to get my license down there.
Okay.
And I did that, and that's kind of where I stand today. So I'm able to sell real estate in Scottsdale, Arizona.
Sure.
And through a company that I created here called eBroker Match.
Okay, I'm glad you mentioned that. I was going to ask you. So,
yeah, it's a really cool deal where I'm able to actually, so far I've been able to team up with and partner up with realtors not only from one company, because I know so many great realtors in Colorado Springs, and that was one of my biggest joys of being in real estate, are all the hundreds and hundreds of great people, not only with one company, but with multiple companies in Colorado Springs. And I've been able to team up with some of my peers from certain companies, and if I feel like I'd like to team up with a client that I know another peer of mine from another company would better service, I can team up with him. It's kind of a new concept.
Wow.
I've had a lot of people asking me about it, and it's allowed me to do business in 2 communities and stay very close to the Colorado Springs market. I'm here once a month, checking in on my business, meeting with my marketing partners, at the same time keeping business going in Scottsdale, Arizona.
Wow.
And it's been pretty cool.
That's crazy, you know, the ability to do that, and that speaks volumes. I mean, anybody out there that's listening to this or watching this, obviously being able to go into different markets and the solidification that you've had in this and then growing there, I mean, it speaks about who you are. It's very difficult for a lot of people to just go from here to here and have success and maintain their relationships and books. But so I guess everybody out there who wants to get on Frank's calendar once or twice a month maybe, so you better mark that down or call him up. So okay, so that's cool. But would you mind touching on that a little bit more, eBroker Match? Just because you said you got a lot of questions on that, just for everybody out there who's watching who doesn't really know the ins and outs of that. I mean, if you don't mind.
No, absolutely. It's really it's something I started thinking about even before I left, because I knew that I didn't want to leave my business here behind.
Right.
I mean, I've had 30 years of very loyal, wonderful clients. Many who, when we made the move to Scottsdale, called and said, "Who's going to service me now? Gosh, you've sold, you sold my parents a house, and you sold me a house, and you sold my kids a house." And I said, "Guys, don't worry about it. I'm here, and I'm here to be able to service you and serve your real estate needs and that kind of thing." And you just can't pick up from living in a community for over 50 years and just leave a city like behind. Right. And I wasn't willing to do that.
Sure.
Colorado Springs is still my home. The thing that's kind of neat was I said, what can I do? What kind of company can I build where I can service both communities? And that's when eBroker Match went from concept to reality.
Beautiful.
One of the things that throughout my career that I'm really proud of is when I have seen the need or had the desire to do something, I've done it.
Sure.
And that was started, back in the early days when a good friend of mine and longtime realtor, very well respected realtor here, Michael About,
Okay.
who he and I are great friends to this day.
Hopefully Michael's watching.
Hey, Michael, we're one of the first teams in real estate. There were very, very few teams, and we were one of the first teams in real estate. And then, of course, going on to be a co-founder of the Platinum Group, and then doing eBroker Match. I've always been really, it's always been just a big desire of mine to say, what can I create next?
That's beautiful.
And I've always been a little bit of a creator. So that's a company that basically specializes on doing broker-to-broker referrals across the nation. The neat thing about it is because I'm not tied to one real estate company specifically. If I'm working with a broker and they say, hey, Frank, I've got a client's going to San Jose, California, North Carolina, whatever.
Sure.
I can say, hey, do you want me to stay within your brand, or do you want the best available realtor for your client? And if they're very loyal to their brand, we'll send that referral through whatever brand they work for or they suggest. And if they just say, doesn't matter, I want the best realtor in the neighborhood or the community that my client's going to.
Okay.
And because I've been fortunate enough to be around the relocation side of real estate ever since I started in the business, I know how to do that. And I know the ins and outs of placing a good referral and making a good match.
Okay.
And so basically the concept was do a match.com for buyers and sellers and realtors.
Perfect.
So that is what has allowed me to utilize that same company to kind of team up with various realtors here in Colorado Springs.
Okay.
And I have, in the 3 years that I've been in Scottsdale, Arizona, I have teamed up with probably in excess of 20 very well respected peers here, not all from one company.
Okay.
And we've done deals. My clients have been tickled to death that I've still been able to be part of it.
That's great.
Yet my boots on the ground, if you will, have been my marketing partners.
Sure.
And I've been very selective with who I work with.
Right.
Because I want to make sure that they're since they're kind of the front person for that business, I want to make sure that I know that they're delivering the same service level that I was delivering to them. And then of course being able to put a point on the exclamation point when I come back.
Right.
Such as this weekend, and I've already done some pop-bys and met with some clients. I have a couple of deals under contract here that I've met with the clients and say, hey, is everything going good? You feel comfortable? And they're like, absolutely, everything's going wonderful. So that's kind of the gist of eBroker Match.
Okay.
So it actually has a couple of components.
Love it.
And it's been a great situation so far.
I think that's fantastic what you're representing, and going through your path and so far through your why, it's changed and you've elevated and adjusted who you are as a man, as a businessman, as a father, a husband, and I think that resonates with a lot of Titans out there, real estate professionals, because it should adjust, it should change, but it's exciting. I mean, you're a thinker, you're a mover, shaker, and that's why you have the reputation you have, in this marketplace, Frank. So that's awesome. Huge share onto that one. So, but tailing into the level of success that you've had, maybe advising a few professionals that are watching this right now, if you could pinpoint one or two things that you had adjusted in your business over your career thus far that really took it to the next level, what might that be for you that you could, give some advice to everybody out there with?
Well, I think you have to adjust with the market.
Okay.
First of all.
Sure.
A lot of people come to me and say, hey, Frank, what did you do? What did you do in the industry that's made you last for 35
right.
years?
That's what a lot of people are going to want to hear.
And man, you got to be a chameleon.
All right.
You've got to be a chameleon. You've got probably the best advice that I got from one of my one of my original mentors, Chris Shields,
Okay.
who started ERA Shields Real Estate.
Wow.
And a lot of people don't know this, but Michael About and I were the first two realtors ever hired by, Shields has a great reputation in town.
For sure they do.
And, they're a fairly good-sized company. Well, at one time it was Chris and Elise Shields and Michael About and Frank Fanelli.
Wow.
That was the Shields Corporation, as it was called then. But he basically said to me when I was in my early 20s, and I said, Chris, what would you recommend that I do to last a long time? And of course, just like everybody else, I wanted to specialize. I was 21 or 22, and I wanted to have all the $1 million homes in the Broadmoor.
Sure.
And obviously I had to slow down a little bit and work my way up to that. But the one thing he said to me that I never forgot, and I passed this on to a lot of the young bucks that come to me for advice.
For sure.
He always said, be a chameleon. So I remember Chris Shields saying to me, he said, Frank, your specialty should be that you have no specialty. And what he meant by that is he said, don't get so specialized thinking that you're a luxury end realtor that when that seller that you just sold $1 million house to has a child who wants to buy his first $250,000 townhome or home, that they're afraid to say, oh my gosh, I don't want to give that to Frank because all he does is $1 million homes.
Sure.
And they end up giving the referral to somebody else.
Oh, wow.
So you have to be a little bit of a chameleon.
For sure.
And you have to let people know, I'm just as happy to represent somebody at 175 to 250 as I am at 2.5 million.
Wow. Hopefully everybody got that. That was big.
Yeah. So that's how what I devised my career on, and it was always very interesting because in the days when we did have, I know the listing inventory is down right now. It's a challenge to get listings, but there were times in my career when we were carrying in excess of 20 to 30 listings because there were more houses on the market than there were buyers.
Right.
But I had $1 million listings, so $1.5 million listings, and I had $150,000 listings and $250,000 listings, and I was just as tickled to get a phone call when somebody said, hey Frank, we've got this house and it's probably worth about $225, would you come out and talk to us about it?
Sure.
I was always just as excited to go out and see that house as I was the $2.5 million house.
Okay.
So if I could give any advice to anybody who's trying to build their business,
Sure.
don't let yourself get so wrapped up into a specific niche that if the market changes and that niche shifts, that all of a sudden you're struggling.
Wow.
So be a chameleon and represent, do it as well as you can. If you're going to take $1 million plus listing, know how to do it. Know what it takes.
I agree.
If you're going to take a $250,000 listing, know what your buyer demographic is, and do that well. As well. So
that's really big advice out there for anybody who's getting involved, but I think even for more seasoned professionals. I mean, there's so many niches and clicks and things along those lines, but being a chameleon, I think, states that outright. Something that I pulled out of that too, Frank, just by listening to you, was that being grateful for the journey and appreciating whether it's a 1 million or if it's a 200,000, because people are people. And you're helping somebody and guiding them through this process, and guess what? They might not be $1 million buyer today, but they might be into the future. Take care of them throughout their entire life, because everybody is a first-time home buyer at some point, and then they move on to their second and third and fourth, and guess what? You were there the whole time because of that mentality that you just mentioned. And there's a few people out there, professionals, that just won't take certain things, and I think that's wrong. I mean, that's just my humble opinion. So I love that you said that, Frank. That's big.
Well, and I will add one thing to that too. And I've one of the things I've enjoyed is I'm one of those guys that when somebody wants insight on the business, whether they're brand new or whether they've been in the business 15 years and they're just going, how did you do this? How did you do that? I don't care who they work for, because we're one big community of realtors. And I love sitting down with realtors, and I don't care what company they're with. I want to see everybody succeed.
Sure.
I always look at the real estate market that you're working in as a piece of pie.
Yeah.
And rarely can you eat a whole piece or a whole pie. You can usually eat a piece of it. Yeah. I'm sure there's times when I could eat the whole pie.
Yes, yes.
But normally, most people can eat a piece of the pie.
Right.
And the one thing I've learned is that the pie is big enough for everybody to succeed.
Love it.
If my success was built on somebody else's failure, I would feel really, really bad about my success to see somebody else fail.
Right.
For me, I want to see everybody succeed, and that means that if it's with the company that I'm with one of my competitors, and I use the word competitors in this business very lightly because we would happen to be blessed to be in one of the businesses where your competitors are your peers.
Right,
your
correct.
competitors are your customers. And so if I had a house listed and somebody brought a buyer in, that realtor is as well my customer. And so I'd always tell my team, treat that other realtor so good that the next time that they see the Fanelli team or Frank and Melissa Fanelli's name on a sign, that they're going, I want to do another deal with the Fanellis, because that's the way they treat our client. They treat me like I'm a customer, even though I work for another company. And that's the way I've tried to mentor and teach other people in the industry.
And that's really huge advice. And again, hopefully everybody's taking note of that. You guys are all working with each other, and it is cross-fertilized as far as who we're working with. And you're going to run into these people. Your reputation is everything. It's not just to the buyers and sellers, but to our peers. I love that you touched on the success factor and that you love to see people succeed. The most successful people that I know, and just talking to everybody out here too, they are givers, and they want to see other people succeed, and they thrive off of it, and they want to help grow. It's those people that are negative or naysayers or that are haters. I'm telling you, they are not the most successful people. And I'm not just talking about financially or transactionally. I'm talking about just in life, balance, everything they represent. So again, that's what really puts you into the category of that Titan, Frank, is because it's not just about the production. It's how you care about your people, the way that you represent the industry as a whole, and then the community. So I'm really excited about all that information as far as success and supporting that. So hopefully everybody got that too. But going into the next question, now this one gets a little deeper, Frank, so hopefully you're cool to share this with everybody watching here. But I think that when things are going smooth, right, in our lives, and we're just kind of on cruise control, it's not difficult, right? But when those speed bumps come up, when the challenges come up that we face, how we overcome them really makes us or breaks us, as far as I'm concerned. So if you wouldn't mind sharing, a challenge in your life that you dealt with, Frank, that made you a stronger man, that you overcame, what might that be for you?
Well, that's a good question. And I think for everybody, there's points in everybody's life when they think, wow, this is kind of a low point in my life. And I feel very blessed from that side of things, because I think I've always been the kind of person that sometimes I'd be going through a low point in my life, and I tried to keep such a positive attitude about it that I didn't realize I was going through a low point in my life until I was actually kind of out of it.
Wow.
And so I know everybody kind of has a story, and I know it's really the thing now, especially like in Hollywood and sports, and when you watch American Idol, it's like everybody wants to say, this is where I came from, this was my low point, and I've built myself up to this part of this period of my life.
Sure.
And I feel very fortunate that I can't say that I really had many low points.
Okay.
And I think some of that is the attitude by which you deal with those low points, and sometimes you don't realize that you're actually in it, as I mentioned before. I would say probably the most challenging point that I had to fight through was the first, what I would have said, severe downturn in the Colorado Springs real estate market.
Okay.
Because that came at a time when things were at their best. And we're closing deals like crazy. We maybe had a little more financial success than we've had before.
Okay.
And I don't think I have to tell many people that were in the business at that time
Sure.
that things came to a screeching halt. And we weren't prepared for it. So luckily I had some good mentorship, financial mentorship and that kind of thing.
Huge.
That helped us get through those tough periods without, without losing everything we had or whatever. But it came as a shock.
For sure.
When you're used to making a certain amount of money over a period of years and you're thinking, oh, it's just going to keep going and going and going because the more experienced I get, the more financial success I'm going to have. And sometimes things happen in the market that are beyond your control.
Absolutely.
And that was the first time that I ever experienced something where I was just going, oh my gosh, what in the world is happening? I'm working harder than ever. I'm spending more money marketing than ever. What's happening? What's happening? Am I losing it?
Okay.
It's like I always say, being a huge football fan and being one of the things that I wish I would have had the talent. I always wanted to play college football.
All right.
Just wasn't there, talent-wise or size-wise. But there, in every sport, whether you're a quarterback or you're a pitcher, you can be at the pinnacle of your career. And something happens beyond your control, and all of a sudden, you're the quarterback that, the 4-year All-Pro quarterback can't complete a pass to save his life. The all-world pitcher, can no longer throw a strike, and you start to doubt yourself.
Right.
It's probably the first time, and I've been in the business about 20 plus years, and it was the first time I was doubting myself, and I said, man, is this really, is God calling me to do something else?
Okay.
Is this a sign?
Sure.
I was looking for answers, thank God that, I had my faith life and
Sure.
Melissa who shares my same faith life, and we prayed through a lot of that and just said, Lord, is this where we need to be? Am I in the right spot? Or am I supposed to be somewhere else? And yet at the same time, a little bit of selfishness was that I didn't realize there were a lot of other realtors, longtime realtors, going through the same thing.
Absolutely, across the board.
Across the board, and then I finally realized, I'm going, hey, wait a minute, this is maybe the first big market challenge that I've had in my career, and was able to fight through it. So I would say that was probably the lowest point in my career.
Okay. Yeah.
And it was tough. It was tough from your ego, because there's a lot of ego in this.
Gosh,
I don't care how humble you say you are, and I always hope that I'm a humble person.
You are. You are.
But there's a lot of ego. You can't get to the level of being one of the top realtors in any market without having a little bit of ego. And so that got stomped on a little bit.
Right.
And so we were able to fight through that, and still a little bit in recovery mode. And I think a lot of realtors, if they were honest, that were practicing real estate back in that time, still probably are in a little bit of a recovery mode.
Right.
So that would probably have been my biggest challenge.
Okay.
In my career. Right. And maybe my low point where I really was questioning if this was what I was supposed to do. And it's funny that you ask yourself that question when you've been in it 20 or 25 years. But think about that, I was only in my 40s.
Okay.
At 25 years, I was only 45 years old.
Sure.
So, and I was going, man, I got a lot of work life ahead of me. Is this how I'm going to finish?
What's happening here?
Yeah, and I remember meeting with one guy who was a mentor of mine who was outside the business, and I was telling him about that. He made a great point. He said, no matter what you do and how much you love doing it, he said, how many guys that you know would love to be professional golfers? And I mean, you're traveling the world, you're playing golf for a living,
sure,
making great money. But he said, even those guys, when they're doing something they'll love, those guys and gals, when you do something for 20, 25, 30 years, things get a little boring, they get a little passé,
right,
and you start thinking, man, is this what I'm going to do for the next 30 years, 20, 30 years, whatever. So that was something that, I really kind of had to fight through.
Okay.
And I think that's one of the reasons why I've kept it fresh and fun by doing some different things. I mean, a lot of people, when I sold my partnership in the Platinum Group, were going, "What in the world are you doing?
Wow.
Are you doing? You're changing all this up at the pinnacle of your career. You're making great money, and you're on the road to recovery, and you're building that business back after that big downturn we had in the Colorado Springs market." And that's where my desire for living a quality of life overtook my desire to become any more financially successful.
That was a complete shift in your mindset too.
Big shift.
So that's breaking that down, I think is huge, and there's so many pieces to that. I think that perseverance really stood out because during those bad times you could have thrown your hands up, given up, and you kept going, you kept pushing. And I think that really speaks volumes about your character and who you are as a professional. But freshening things up, changing things up, that's what life is about. I mean, I had a buddy tell me this years ago, but the one thing that's consistent in this world, in this life, is change. Nothing stays the same, ever. We get older, our health changes, relationships change, business changes, markets change. It's constant change. Adapting, being a chameleon, I think is extremely important for that. So everybody out there, listening to this, I think that they can really resonate, especially like you said, the professionals that were in that time frame with you in the Colorado Springs market downturn. And Frank, but you wouldn't be who you are today without dealing with those challenges, without moving forward. And I think going along those lines with those challenges, nothing grows in that comfort zone. So you literally took it and said, hey, you know what? Everybody's looking like you're crazy, moving and shaking and doing what you do, but that's what makes you you. That's what makes you a Titan. So I just have to flat out say that. And hopefully everybody got that out of what you said, because that's what I took from it.
I appreciate that. I've never been afraid to jump out of my comfort zone.
Yeah.
It's not easy.
No way.
But and that goes even back to establishing a new business in a new city. Because when I was in Scottsdale, I was a heavy networker. When I'd fly down to Scottsdale for a weekend, I was meeting with realtors, I was networking with title companies, lenders, and I'm going down there and I'm going, well, I ought to do pretty well because I'm very well connected down there.
Sure.
Until I got down there and realized, I'm going, man, these are all my peers. These are not customers.
Sure.
My fellow realtors aren't going to be buying houses from me. My title company's not going to be buying houses from me. And so you got to drop that ego a little bit.
For sure.
And and I'm starting, I'm building a new database in a new community. And when you've been in a city for 50 plus years, like I have Colorado Springs, it's not easy from an ego standpoint to go, wow, I'm really starting in a new market.
Sure. Fresh in a sense.
Fresh.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, my learning curve is much quicker because I have 35 years of real estate behind me.
Right.
But by the same token, I don't have the database and the built-in realtor, the client relations that I have here.
Right.
And so that's why it's been fun to be able to still foster what I have here. Wow. And it must resonate with some people, Greg, because I probably get between 2 to 5 calls a month from realtors here and other communities that I know who say, Frank, talk to me. How are you doing this? I think a lot of that has to do with my age, and a lot of other people who were saying, hey, I've been here 20 years. I've been here selling real estate 30 years. We love going to Florida. We love going to California and that kind of thing. But we're not ready to retire. We're not ready to leave our home, Colorado Springs, which is a very difficult place to ever leave. That's why it'll always be our home. We love being able to call Colorado Springs and Scottsdale our homes.
Yeah.
Two great, beautiful communities. And that's the way we hope to finish our career, many years down the road, Lord willing. But with all the people that have reached out to me to say, can you talk to me about how you're doing this? We've been thinking about doing the same thing. I'm so afraid to do it.
Right.
And I wouldn't say it's for everybody. Not everybody may have the stomach for it.
No.
But we did it, and we're making it work.
You're making it work. What's interesting too is anybody that's out there, I'm sure that you're going to be getting a little bit more phone calls onto that too, Frank, because I'm sure people are going to want advice and that sort of thing. So call Frank. His contact information will be below.
Happy to take the phone calls.
But going into the next portion, something a little softer. Thank you so much for sharing that, though, Frank. I mean, challenges and things that we deal with, they're not easy to share. There's a big audience out here watching, so hopefully they all appreciate it. I know that I do. So going into the next question, a little softer, a little lighter. If you could go back in time and take a look at your younger self, any point of time in your life, in your career, and give a piece of advice or two to young Frank, what would you say to yourself?
I'm not sure if I would have taken the advice that I would give myself.
That's fair. That's being honest, people. This is live. This is real here.
Because I didn't realize, I think everybody just assumes that the longer they're in the business, the more successful they're going to be.
Mm-hmm.
I think that if I could have given myself advice from 20 or 25 years ago, I would have said, when that market, when your business and that market takes off, put away in different venues. I've always been real estate heavy. And that's one of the things that was, a little bit of a shock, because the real estate market was hit hard. So I thought we were doing everything right. We were buying rentals. We had owned multiple homes in Colorado Springs. And from that standpoint, I knew I was real estate heavy investment-wise.
Right.
But if I could go back and tell myself, what can I do better to better prepare myself for the future? I probably would have diversified a little bit.
Okay. That's huge advice.
Maybe done some different things. And I remember one real estate speaker that I listened to, and I really took his advice, and he said, when you have money to invest, invest it in what you know. And real estate is what I knew.
Listen to that, everybody.
And so that's why we ended up being a little real estate heavy. Because we were in a downturn for a little bit longer than anybody thought, a lot of not only me, but people that we peers in the business, a lot of us sold properties and investment properties, which had we held on to them, go figure, we'd all be doing a lot better than we are now. But that would be the one thing that I think that I would tell the younger me. And it's something that, for example, one of my very, very dear friends in the business, who's been with me for a long time, and he always says that I'm his mentor, but I always say, we've shared mentorship on both sides. It's Gary Martinez, who just opened the Cutting Edge Realtors.
Love Gary. Shout out to Gary, by the way, fellow Titan.
And Amy, his lovely wife Amy, and I'm so excited for them. But the one thing, for example, and when Gary says, "Hey Frank, what advice can you give me or whatever?" I always said, take your young bucks, men and women who are just getting in the business, and teach them the experience that you had, that now getting into the market now is a lot different than what this business is going to look like in 5 or 10 years. We all know that.
Wow, that's great. Yeah.
So, I wish I would have been better prepared to say, hey, even though you're building your business, it can turn on a dime on you.
Sure.
And that's why I've always said, hey, just prepare your younger realtors, your newer realtors that are with your company, prepare them that you have to be, make yourself ready for the next market change.
Whatever that may be.
Whatever that may be. It may get better.
Sure.
It may get worse.
Right.
Don't get too comfortable in the market that you're in, because it's going to change.
Right.
And I know that's one thing that they stress to their newer or younger realtors.
For sure.
And I think they're doing a wonderful job at that. That was advice I wish I would have had. But the market, we didn't have such a drastic market change in the first 25 years I was in the business until we went down.
Okay.
And then, of course, we hadn't seen it go up like it has in the last couple, 18 to 24 months either.
Wow.
So there's a lot to be learned
For sure.
for the young or newer. And I say young realtors, I'm not even talking about age.
No,
I'm talking about
newer
time
to
in the
the
business.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. And that's big, Frank. I mean, what you just said there, I think that not only your younger self would appreciate that, but anybody out there who's watching this, I mean, that clicks. I think to anybody who's thinking about diversifying their portfolio of investments, planning ahead, right? I think that that's important, not necessarily being reactive, but being proactive. And that's exactly what you just hit right there. So that's huge advice. So hopefully everybody takes that, to heart for sure. So let's go into a feeding thought process as far as feeding your mind, because we're always kind of going into that as far as what books you reading, podcasts you listen to, maybe influencers on social media. I know, and I want to shout you out here too real quick, Frank, because you did bring your new book, so that's a big thing, by the way. So congratulations on that.
Thank you.
I don't know if that's a part of your answer into what books you read and things like that, but yeah. So what does that look like for you?
Well, I appreciate you saying that,
Yeah.
and I did write my first book, and it was just published. It's called "Creating the Unrivaled Workplace," and it's part of me wanting to share with people who maybe didn't grow up in the cool environments that I grew up in. I grew up in the neatest workplace environments, first with Chris and Elise Collins Shields
Right.
at Shields, and then we developed a really cool workplace at the Platinum Group Realtors. And as we were doing that, I was looking around and I realized that there's a lot of people who are working in environments that are not as positive and not as family oriented and that kind of thing. And I always said, we all deal with the same messes
Right.
out there with things that happen with inspections and appraisals and all. The business is the same outside your office. So darn it, create an environment that when you come in your office, you're pumped, you're energized, great vibe and stuff like that. And that's what really challenged me to write this book, to say I've been in some really cool work environments and been very fortunate to be able to help create some of those environments. And I wanted to share that with people because I want people, and this is not a real estate book, by the way. In fact, probably 50% of the books that have been purchased so far don't even have anything to do with real estate.
Wow.
So it's people who just said, hey, I've heard that you wrote a book. It's kind of a step-by-step book on how to create a more balanced, family-oriented, positive culture environment, because it's something that's a challenge in today's workplace. Business
across the board.
Absolutely. And by the way, I mean, the millennials in a few years are going to be our biggest workforce, and if you're not dialed into a good culture, you're not going to last very long.
Culture's everything. It'll make or break it.
Right. So that's one of the reasons why I wrote the book, and I'm pleased to say that it's doing pretty well. It'll be on Amazon. I haven't even gotten there yet.
Okay, I was going to ask you, where can people pick it up?
Yeah, you can contact me directly. That's how most of the books have sold so far.
Okay.
But I'm not a big reader.
Okay.
So I'm a listener, and I'm an observer.
Okay.
And probably two of my favorite guys that had the most influence and impact on me were two speakers that we hired to do a couple retreats.
Okay.
One is Jared James.
Wow.
And he's a nationally known speaker, very well known, and love his positive message. I've used a lot of his philosophies and that kind of thing. And then a gentleman who's become a good friend of mine, Mike Staver, who's also a very well-known national speaker.
Wow.
And we had him in for a retreat, and he told us the story of his desire to take a year off his very, very successful speaking business and do a motorcycle trip for a year.
Wow.
And if I remember correctly, I think he did this motorcycle trip solo. And it was a very spiritual building trip for him.
Sure.
And I'm listening to him right at that point when I was telling you I was going through that. Is this who I am? Is this who I'm going to be for the next 10, 15, 20 years?
Right.
And it just really stuck to me. It really hit me hard.
Right.
And I think that retreat, that listening to him speak at that particular event is what gave me the confidence to make the change in my business and try something different and say, man, I'm going to do something that's a little bit out of the box. And so shout out to Mike for that.
Awesome.
And we've become good friends since, and that's been pretty neat.
Okay.
But so yeah, I'm more of a guy that just loves to, I soak in seminars, conferences.
Perfect.
I like to listen to, I'm much more, I'd rather listen than read.
Yes.
I'm a little ADD.
I hear you.
In fact, I wouldn't say I'm a little ADD. I think I'm a lot ADD.
It's getting real, everybody. It's getting real.
So yeah, so for me to read, I'm not sure I've even read my whole book cover to cover, and it's a short one.
There's a testimonial right there.
But I paid good money to have it proofread, so I know it's. No, I'm teasing. I have read it several times. But anyway, so I would say that's kind of been my influence.
Okay, perfect. And what I'll do for everybody out there who's watching, list the speakers, podcast, and or Frank's book in the comments and description below, so you guys can check that out. Take a look at the content. So that's super good, Frank. So last but not least, and it's been an absolute honor and pleasure for you to be on the show, but I have one more question for you. If you could sum up your brand as who you are and what you represent out in the public, in the community, if you have a mantra or a quote that you live by, what is that for Frank Fanelli?
Well, my mantra is something, it's very simple, and I don't remember where I saw it. It's on my phone, it's on one of my screensavers.
Okay.
And it was very simple. It said, happiness is the new rich.
Wow.
So maybe when you're starting in your career, you're all about, let's do the 7-day-a-week thing, let's build our business, and I think that's really cool.
Right.
But one thing I've learned from the younger generation is, and I think you probably see this too, in your business,
right,
is I'm a sponge. Hey, just because I've been around the business for 35 years, I'm just as eager to listen to and learn something from someone who's been in it 1 year.
Right.
And I love the fact that a lot of the younger generation, early on, is they're focusing on what makes them happy.
Sure.
I think that's one of the reasons why I've been learning from the younger generation to work smarter, not harder.
Perfect.
Obviously they're growing up in a different world than we grew up with different tools and the internet and all the social media that I love, and I've been a sponge and I've taken part in as well.
Sure.
But I would say that that's something that I see in the younger generation. It took me 30 or 35 years to realize that.
Wow.
Whereas I think that the power of that statement, that happiness is the new rich, is something that I feel right now is more important to me than saying financial gain or making the most money.
Right.
Is what makes me rich. It's happiness that makes me rich, and hopefully that'll take me through the rest of my career. And hey, I may never make the kind of money I was making at one time, but it doesn't matter to me anymore.
No.
I'm probably happier than I've ever been, and I think that's something that we see in the younger generation, and not that these guys aren't aggressive and these gals aren't aggressive, and they're doing a great job. I love that younger generation and what they're bringing to the real estate table.
Sure.
But my hope is that it doesn't take some of these young guys and gals who are in the business, being in the business 35 years, to realize that their happiness is what is what's fulfilling.
Right.
Not the financial piece.
And Frank, that sums it up. I mean, I think that's a beautiful representation, quote, mantra. So, again, everybody, thanks so much for taking the time to be a part of this. I really appreciate the support and the attention. Frank, I want to thank you again, man. I really appreciate you being here on the show. And I want to officially say you are a real estate titan, my friend. So, absolutely.
Well, thank you, Greg. This has been a phenomenal series. I'm just, like I said before, it's been something I enjoy. I've loved, in fact, when I miss one, I catch myself going back.
Where is it? Yeah.
And to hear who was the last Titan that you interviewed, because I feel like I get something from everybody, and looking forward to the future Titan interviews you do. They're extremely informative, and anybody who's not listening to them, I think, is missing out.
Hey, you heard it straight
time.
From Frank. Listen to this, everybody. Thanks, Frank. I appreciate it, man. So everybody out there, again, live every Tuesday afternoon and Friday afternoons. Another Titan, a different perspective in a different area. So again, I appreciate all your time and attention, and we will catch you on the next one. Thanks so much, everybody.